this is where we have found ourselves. So this is kind of like a week 3 of a series within a series on hope, suffering, and all things the end. Wow, isn't that exciting? So fun. So if you have a Bible, 2 Corinthian chapter 5, verses 1 to 10 is where we're going to be this morning. Once again, if you do not have a Bible, we have kind of gray, soft cover Bibles at the back there. That is our gift to you. Take it home, make it your own. We would love for you to do that. Okay. Before we start with the passage, I just want us to kind of think about why this is important. I was talking to a pastoral mentor of mine, and one of the things he said is one of the most important things you can do for your congregation is to give them a theology of death, which is like, whoa, I just had a cup of coffee, relax. But it's so important because it allows us to understand or have a grasp on what is happening currently right now. I did a funeral yesterday, and as I was thinking about most funerals and the language that goes on with this, the language is so important that we can't help but understand that the actual end of all of this, in order for us to have language, is not just overly comforting to the point where it becomes untrue. And so we have to grasp all of what Paul is about to say in God's kind of larger plan, and it all starts from the beginning. God, in his overflow of love of himself, Father, Son, and Spirit, in the overflow, decided to create. And what he decided to create from the overflow of his love was tangible, physical things. The stars, the moon, the planet, animals, people. All of these things had a physicality to them because physicality was the means in order to access God's goodness. And all of that, the very beginning, God says, is good. That's Genesis 1 and 2. So when we jump into the passage this morning, let that kind of be the backdrop in your mind. Here we go. Paul writes this to the church in Corinth. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, he's talking about our bodies, the tent being our bodies. We have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling. If indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked, for while we were still in this tent we groaned, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up in my life. He who has prepared us for the very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. The reason why this is important, and the reason why this passage has to be understood, is pretty simple. What a person hopes for shapes what they live for. What a person hopes for shapes what they live for. And it's a very kind of easy way to describe this, okay? My cousin, his job is to create kind of like those circular metal contraptions that hold a street sign to a sign, okay? That little like metal ring that holds it together, he literally by hand just like makes them every day. That is a boring job, okay? And he sends me a lot of videos while he does it. So he's not doing a lot, okay? So imagine he's sitting there and he's just like building these things by hand or whatever. And at the end of it, his paycheck for the year is going to be $15,000. He's going to sit there and just dread every moment doing this menial, tedious task day after day after day. And he's going to hate it. Imagine doing this menial, tedious task every single day, but the end reward was not $15,000, it was $20 million. And instead of just depressing videos that he sends me about little ring, circle, metal things, now he's like, I'm living the best life ever. I hang out, I listen to music, I make these dumb little things, and I'm making 20 mil. You see how the experience has changed because what is going to come? It's that simple, it's that easy. If something in the future is so good, then how you deal with the thing now completely changes. So what we have to get a good view on is the thing in the future, because that hope changes you in the process of the now. Now let's go a little bit less general and trivial, and let's go to something that weighs a little bit more. There's a guy named Viktor Frankl. If you've never read his book, Man's Search for Meaning, I would recommend it highly for you. It's something to read. The story is he was an Austrian man who got the Nazis Now, one of the interesting things about Viktor Frankl is that he was Jewish and a psychologist. And so he got taken to this concentration camp, but he could not turn off his psychology brain in the middle of seeing everybody suffer in the concentration camp. And usually what happens over years or decades was now being concentrated into such a small array of time of how people process grief and suffering and death and pain and all the things that happened around him. And he couldn't turn his psychology brain off, so he kept on marking different things that would happen to different people. And what he said, which was fascinating, he said the first people to die were the people who had nothing to live for after this concentration. The people who had no hope in anything, who had nothing to live for, no people to go back to. There was nothing tethering them to the future. Those were the people that were living first. The ones who had no hope. The second group of people were really interesting. The second group of people were the people who gave themselves license to move forward through life, but they had a fantasy in their brain of what they were going to do. It was something that wasn't true, that couldn't actually root them down to reality. I'm going to go and become a billionaire after this, and that wasn't going to be the reality. And what happened is, once their fantasy was broken, their life was broken, and those people could not continue living. The third group of people was the hardest group to step. This group of people were the people who put their hopes in things that could be taken away. And there's multiple stories. Imagine how crazy this is. I'm sorry for the intensity of the relationship. There are people who would put their life into their family, put their hope into their family, and they got out of the concentration camp and they realized that their family wasn't there anymore. And they decided, imagine this, people living through a concentration camp took their lives because the thing they hoped for wasn't there. These are the only people that had a way of operating within this concentration camp and getting through this in a way that didn't absolutely destroy them through the process were the kinds of people who had a hope that transcended their circumstance. A hope that regardless of what happened now or after I left this, would never be able to take the hope that I have today. Paul in 2 Corinthians agrees with Viktor Frankl. And what he says is that you put your hope in something that is stored from you and cannot be taken away. His whole language of heaven within this passage is quite remarkable, because what he's saying is, and even the language, the very last verse in verse 5, he who has prepared us for this very thing that we are hoping for is God, and has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. In other language, Paul would say that the Spirit is given to you as an inheritance. It's financial language. Think about Vancouver. For those of us who are, lucky to own in this city, you put a deposit, or you put in an investment, or you put in a what's the word I'm looking for? When you give a down payment. There we go. You give a down payment to the bank, and what is a down payment? The down payment is a security of something that will come in full later on, right? And what God is saying is the Spirit given to you is the down payment of the eternal thing later. It's a financial term. But that thing that you are going to get later is going to be stored in a place that no one can take it away. And Paul, the language of the bank, per se, or the place that is the vault, or the storage area, is what Paul uses as the word heaven. There's no different. That image is of heaven than what we might have in our minds, right? The classic, what cream cheese commercial of babies shooting other babies with love arrows and diapers on a cloud. It's this ethereal, fancy place where you get to just go back and be with your loved ones that you have lost. Look at how differently Paul is using the language. This isn't Michelangelo or Dante. This is Bible. It is a place where God is, and he stores the great future with himself. Heaven is not a place that you go to. Heaven is a home that you go with. It's confusing. If I say I am going to a space, then what we have is we have earth down here, we have heaven up here. They are just two rooms that are in different spaces or on different floors. I go for floor 1, I die, I pass away, I go to floor 2. Wow, this is what heaven's like. It's a very different place. That's not what Paul uses this passage as. Heaven is not a separate floor, a vacuous space that you go to and be back with the people that you lost. Heaven is a space of a person, which means that you do not get heaven unless you have Jesus. Because it's like, this is my room, and you don't get my room without me. And there is something that Jesus offers to us when we enter into his space that is only accessible if you have him. And what's so important for us to recognize when we go back to this verse is that Paul is going to be very realistic of what's going to be happening now. Look at this, verse 2. For in this tent we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling. Groaning. He's completely realistic. What he's saying is that you will have suffering, you will have grief, you will be burdened. There is a life of trouble that is ahead of you, but the Christian gospel and the Christian hope does not paint a rosy picture for you of what life is. In fact, it says you are going to find yourself in a world of cruelty, a world of persecution, a world of quarrels, a world of wars, a world of spite, of jealousy and envy. It is an absolute realism about what happens with you. This is not a fantasy. This is not a future hope that can just be taken away from you. What Paul is saying is that this is all a direct result of the sin, of utter rebellion, and things are going to be hard. But how do you get through now? You get through now when you realize that the future hope that is being held for you is something absolutely magnificent. It will blot out every human rebellion in existence. And he's not a bit surprised by the people who cannot understand this kind of grace, because he says, listen, it is so unimaginable, I'm not surprised you cannot imagine it. And every person who has grasped this understanding of this future hope, of this thing that is going to come to us later, are people who, like in Hebrews 11, all of this hall of faith that we kind of have, these were individuals who longed for a city with God as its foundation, whose builder and maker was God himself. They didn't have a realistic faith that said to them, everything's going to be peachy keen or nice or whatever. They had a realistic view of how the world was. And their confession and all that they confessed is that my life is intended to be with someone, not to go somewhere. Heaven is determined on a person. And we are travelers going to his world and his place and his space to be with him. And that's how I get through now. Which is why the strictly materialist people who come into church, they don't quite understand by going, either some people said, this is all that we have. The things, the tangibleness, this is all we have. So the meaninglessness of life is the only thing that we can kind of go through. Or you could be like the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. You guys seen this movie? It was like an Oscar-nominated movie before. And the whole film is just a philosophical dialogue between nihilism, which is basically everything is meaningless, and so everything should be destroyed, and absurdism. Absurdism is basically, no, I totally get it. Everything is meaningless, but let's be absurd about it. Let's act like it's not. That was the conversation that we're having. When you are left with just material things with no purpose or meaning in life, the options that you have is everything should be destroyed, or they shouldn't be destroyed. Let's act like there is purpose even though we know it's not. And Paul is saying, don't you realize that there is something so much grander than just those perspectives of life? Whatever kind of thing you want to add to does not make sense. You do not get through your life by drugs, sex, and rock and roll. You don't get through by numbing yourself about the expression of how cruel this life is going to be. He says you are going to find yourself with something more permanent, more important, more gracious, more loving. Paul has just previously said this light and momentary affliction is achieving or preparing for us a weight of glory. This view in your life doesn't provide an escapist mentality which most Christians are accusing. You're just waiting to die so you can go and be in heaven, and you're not actually creating any good for you. It's because we don't have a view of hope to come. what is the next world? I talked about why it's so important to have it, but what actually is it? Here's a quote from one individual. This is what he writes. A first century author writes this. All of us are sojourners here and strangers and exiles. The soul is an exile and a wanderer, as on an island buffeted by the seas, imprisoned within the body like an oyster in its shell. And he goes on to continue to say, and you are intended to one day go home, talking about space. As I said, I did a funeral yesterday, and I was thinking about my time at funerals. And most of the time at funerals, this quote is the summation of most of the language that you get. They are in a better place. The things that are happening right now that they are feeling is different. They have now gone somewhere in some kind of a language. They've escaped from their body and now their soul is somewhere. And this quote actually kind of sums up most of the opinions of Christian weddings that I go to, or Christian funerals that I go to. They've finally gone home at last to be where their soul was always intended to be. The problem is that is not first century or modern Christianity. That is first century paganism. And the author of that quote is not John or Paul the Apostle. The author of that quote was the first century essayist and Platonic philosopher Plutarch, who writes this in the Shrine at Delphi. My issue is that most Christians, I'll take that back, some Christians wouldn't know the difference between the two. First century Platonism to the biblical view of Christianity, where they're not floor one, floor two, a vacuous space of earth and a vacuous space of heaven. But actually, the biblical definition of heaven is something much more interlocked and overlapped. Why do I know this? Because we have Jesus. And Jesus was, as a human being, what the space of the temple was in the Old Testament. And what was the temple in the Old Testament? The temple in the Old Testament was when heaven and earth collided in a space and we found God. Together, not separated. And what do you have in Jesus? You have fully human, fully God come together. And when we see Him, we see all of the divine together, interlocked, overlapped, and importantly, physical, bodily. He's a man with flesh that you can touch. And it wasn't just Him living, it's listen to the language. It says we want to put on our heavenly dwelling, which means that there's a physicality to heavenness. That the heavenly thing that we are waiting to have is something that will show itself physically with us. We are not floating spirits that will go up into the sky and just like hang out with a bunch of clouds in whatever we say space is. No. You were intended for sense within your nose. The sights of the clouds, sand in between your toes, laughs and giggles that you could hear through your ears, the feeling of constructed furniture that is beautiful, the sight of amazing architecture. You were meant for physicality, and you are always meant for physicality, because God, at the beginning of all things, created everything with a sensory and physical nature because it was the means to experience His goodness, and that does not change. If your view of heaven is one day we will be rid of the body and we will be in spirit-led wherever, don't you realize that is not the defeat of death, it's just its description. It's like having a bully come up to you and say, I'm not going to defeat the bully, I'm just going to leave the bully alone and find something else to do. No. That's not what God does with this. When you put on the heavenly dwelling, when you put it on over top what you are already wearing, what he's describing is an overcoming or an overwhelming of the death that intruded in the first place. When it showed up. And the fact that you are experiencing the pain that you are experiencing now is not a sight to just be like, oh, let's be dismissive. At the funeral yesterday, I talked about John chapter 11. Jesus is informed that his best friend Lazarus has passed away. And he takes 3 days and he goes and he finally rolls up. And why did he take 3 days? He took 3 days because somebody was officially dead after 3 days. So he waits 3 days and he walks up to the tomb. And what does Jesus not do? He doesn't go to Mary and Martha, Lazarus' siblings, and go, chin up, tough luck. Don't worry, you're going to go and escape in spirit land. Everything's going to be fine, it's all going to be great. And the pain that you're feeling now is irrelevant because of the stuff in the future. That's not what he does. He doesn't have a sermon, he doesn't have an essay, he doesn't have a long speech, he doesn't have this thing that he's going to present to them that's going to make them feel better. Jesus walks up to the tomb of his friends and he weeps. Weeps. Passage says that Jesus walks up to the tomb and it says that he is moved deeply. Most of our English translations mute the emotion. What does it mean when you weep? We all know different kinds of weeping, right? We know the weeping that we're so excited that we're crying and there's snot coming out of our nose at the same time. We can't tell what liquid is what liquid. We have that kind of crying. We have the crying, which may or may not have happened to me, where the door is open and my wife walked down the aisle and I can neither confirm nor deny. The times where you're so disappointed with yourself that all you can do is just let out the frustration and tears. Or there are the moments that you see such crazy injustice in the world that in anger overwhelms you. The only way that you express is tears. And Jesus walks up and says that it is moved deeply. The language actually, if you directly translate it, is he snorted loudly. It's like an animal frustrated. It's in one way he was quaking with rage. But it makes no sense in the Lazarus story. Why is Jesus so angry when he knows that he's going to raise Lazarus from the grave? Doesn't that kind of seem weird? I know this guy's going to be back, so why is he so emotional in the moment? Because he says at the end of all of this, I will make your pain a servant of your joy. I will do an action at the end of all time that will justify everything that goes before. But you are experiencing the pain of an intruder that was never supposed to be here, and he's angry because of it. And it's like he looks at all people in Lazarus' life, and he just looks at them and he says, I'm so sorry that you have to experience the effects of this intruder. I'm so sorry that you have to experience the effects of this intruder. But what does he do? He's not just a God who knows us through our tears. Do you realize that the frustrations of life, Jesus felt those as well? Felt them to such a point where God knows the anger. Where even in suffering on the cross for our sins, God knows what it means to lose a loved one. Jesus goes. He says to one of Lazarus' siblings, I am the resurrection. He raises Lazarus physically, to touch, to feel, to smell, to eat. Jesus himself dies on a cross. On this wooden tree, he's hung there, naked. Dies, is put on a tomb for how many days? 3 days. Lazarus was when he arises, Thomas, you gotta love Thomas, right? Thomas is like, nah, dude. I'm not gonna believe that until I sense it. And he runs his hands to Jesus' breast and he goes, what? Paul Paul and other places will say that Jesus is the first fruits of what is happening to all of us. That what happened to Christ in the resurrection will happen to all people who follow Christ. And what you experience with Christ is there's someone who came back tangibly, Thomas felt him, and he ate fish. That's good news. I love fish. There's a hunger, there's a sensation, there's a physicality to all of this that he was experiencing. So the question that we have to answer is not, what is life after death? The question that we have to experience, and the question that Paul is trying to get us to hear, is not what is life after death. It's in the way that N.T. Wright writes it, life after death. Because we get two things mixed up. Jesus on the cross, he's hanging there, two thieves on either side of him. And the one thief goes, don't you know that this is the Son of God? And he says, hey, can I be with you after all of this? And Jesus looks at him and he says to him, today you will be with me in paradise. What does that mean? Well, if you know, tell me, because that's a complicated verse. That's where the Catholics will look at it and they'll say something of a purgatory. There's this in-between space. That's how they go there. I don't think most of us would go there, but what he's saying is it's not just the experience of life after death. It's life after death. It's this bodily resurrection. It's the odd hope that gives us shape and meaning to the rest of the story that God is going to tell to us. And it's what's going to become true of us. This life after death is described in Revelation 21 this way. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, preparing as the bride adorned for her husband. Okay, quick stop. If you're one of the people, should I do this? Yes, I'm going to do it. If you're one of the people who one day think that you are going to just like teleport out of here in a thing called the rapture, which direction does heaven move?
Toward us.
Do we go to it, or does it come to us? I'll leave that there. Anyways, okay, here we go. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, so heaven is moving towards earth, coming to be with earth. Behold the dwelling place of God, defined by a person, not defined by a space. The dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. If you have read a lot of the Old Testament, it's like all of the warnings are going off. This is just everything he intended in the book. And what's the hope? That he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things are past. In the language of John, as well as Paul, as well as Jesus, is not saying let's discard this body for something different or whatever. It's even the language, it says put the heavenly dwelling over top of what already exists. What it's not saying is a discarding of the old thing to get something brand new. It's saying something different. There's two words for new. So in Revelation 21 it says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. New heaven and a new earth. There's two words. There's neos, which is where you get the word new, or neo, like neo-evangelical or whatever. But it's something new. There's also this Greek word called kainos. And when Jesus here doesn't use the word new, in the Greek it would kind of be like, you are a neos woman. You are a young woman. That's how it would kind of come across. You're young. You're new. You get the familiarity. Kainos is not new as in the age of something. Kainos is new in terms of the quality of something. So when Jesus would go on to say, you don't put new wine into old wineskins, You put it into new wineskins. What he's not talking about is the age of the leather or the age of the wineskin. He's talking about the quality. That it has not stretched to the point where all the gases are being released. It is a kind of quality of wineskin that's able to do the purpose that it's intended to do. It is something new. Not by a discarding of the old thing, but by an enhancing of the present thing. You heard what I'm saying? It's about quality, not about age. And all of this resurrection language comes to you as well. Look what verse 6 says in 2 Corinthians. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. So his heaven language, once again, is not about a space, it's about a person. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Wish we had more time there. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. If the option is to be here physically without God, or to be there spiritually with God, we're going to do the spiritual route. Why? Because it's with the Lord. And that's the most important piece of this. So whether we are away, at home or away, we make it our aim to please him, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Christmas time. What's the best gift you ever got at Christmas? For me, I remember I was a young kid. I had put I want a dog on my Christmas list for like 6 years straight. My mom, she's in the second row, too cheap. Didn't want to buy me a dog. No? Anyways, okay, so Christmas list, dog. I'm upstairs, I'm playing Super Nintendo or whatever with my cousins. Downstairs, this is the moment. Scruffy will be mine. Booking downstairs. There is my uncle, holding a stuffed golden retriever, barking at the top of his lungs. And everyone in the room begins to laugh as hard as they can. And I went and I cried. I thought all of my dreams were going to come true. And I was lied to and have gone to counseling since. I always think like even the language of judgment. Sometimes I think we think of it too much like a criminal trial. There's going to be a list of things that we're going to get in trouble for and more counts against us, and that's what being in front of the judgment of the Lord is going to be like. But if you are someone who has this future hope, it's almost like, isn't it so exciting to get kids for Christmas? What do? I don't know if you do this. I hope you do. You just sit them down on the chair. And then you go and you like bring gift one. And they just lose their minds. My wife's cousin, he was at a hospital here recently. He has a lot of illnesses that he deals with. And so he's in like a care facility here in Vancouver. And it was his birthday, and we sat him down. He's actually in a wheelchair, so he sat there, and he had his friend Abed. He was like the roommate in his room. He invited to the birthday party. And he didn't know him before this experience. And Abed comes, and he's hanging out. And my mother-in-law gets him this ginormous box. And Abed, who we don't even know, is just chilling there. And he's looking at this box, and he's like, and he says to my wife's cousin, "This is going to be awesome for us." That's what he says. For us. Who are you? Anyways. And so he goes and he opens the gift, and it's like this big kind of toy. And sits there in front of the whole family, and he goes, "Wow, that was pretty anticlimactic." It's like you're waiting for this gift, and you're like just so disappointed. I just think about that moment sometimes when I'm driving, and maybe that's like the great feeling.
Mine's nervous.
End of all of this, and this judgment is like, these things that I longed for, and I was living in this fantasy land and I never got any of them. What this is saying is that the good God who created good things will defeat death and evil to redeem those good things, to give his good things to his good people. And it's like you're sitting down, and day after day, this judgment that God gives to his people is not a disciplinary action. It's this: here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. You want to know why I know this? There's this beautiful parable. It's called the parable of the talents. There's 3 servants. The servants come to him and he says, hey, I'm going to give you 10. I'm going to give you 5. I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to give you 1. So 4 servants. 5, 2, 1. The servants come up, gives the money. A week later, they all come back, and the master goes to the servants and he says to them, what'd you do with the money? The servant number 1 says, you gave me 10, and I brought you back an extra 10. Now you got 20. Here you go. And he goes, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a little, you'll be faithful over much. Second servant goes up and he says, you gave me 5, and I brought you back an extra 5. So you gave me 5, I'm now giving you 10. And listen, it wasn't about the amount of fruit. They double the amount that they were given. And Jesus says the exact same language to servant number 2 as he did to servant number 1. Well done. Gives them the same treatment. The person with the 2 comes up, and they also double their money. And Jesus says the exact same answer to him. Well done. Faithful over little, be faithful over much. The person with the 1 said, Master, I know that you are a hard man. You reap what you do not sow, and so I hid your money, and I'm giving you back exactly what you gave me. And the response there to somebody who wasn't faithful was, you wretched and slothful servant. You didn't do anything with what I gave you. And then he goes and he informs, give that 1 to the person who brought back me 10. Because they were faithful over little, and now I will make them faithful over much. And to those who are faithful with what was little given to them, more will be given to them. And so what if we think about, and I'm good with Jesus, love Jesus, the hope that he's offering me of this bodily resurrection, of new creation made good again, gets me to a place where I can not only handle now, but when I think about being in front of the awesome judgment seat of Christ, it's not this terrifying experience of a judge with a gavel reading off all of my crimes. But what if it's actually more like, because I know you, because God, you are my Father, because Jesus, you are the first fruits of what I ended up walking into. What if the judgment seat was not a judge on a gavel, but it was of a Father giving the gifts of him stewarding the things that you already were faithful for, and saying, because you were faithful over little, I will make you faithful over much. You heard it said, this future hope that he has for us is incredibly important. And this is why all this matters. History matters because human beings matter. Human beings matter because creation matters. Creation matters because the Creator matters. And the Creator, according to some of the most ancient Jewish beliefs, grieved so much over creation gone wrong, over humankind in rebellion, over thorns and thistles and dust and death, that he planned from the beginning the way by which he would rescue his world, his creation, his history from its tragic corruption and decay. The way, therefore, by which he would rescue his image-bearing creatures, the muddled and rebellious human beings from their doubly tragic fate. The way, therefore, by which he would be most truly himself would become most truly himself. The story of Jesus of Nazareth, which we find in the New Testament, offers itself as Jesus himself offered his public works and words, his body and blood, as the answer to this multiple problem. The arrival of God's kingdom precisely in the world of space, time, and matter, the the world of injustice and tyranny, of empire and crucifixions. This world is where the kingdom must come, on earth as it is in heaven. What view of creation, what view of justice would be served by the offer merely of a new spirituality and a one-way ticket out of trouble, an escape from the real world? The redundant answer is there isn't. And in Jesus proclaiming his good creation, he is standing up to his goodness and to his justice, and defeating the intruder and all of its effects to say, listen, I will make your pain now a servant of your joy later. And if you can experience and understand that I'm keeping something for you later that will blow your mind, the thing that you are walking through now, listen, you can do this. And you don't do this because you're great. You don't do this because you're really strong and you're really tough. It's because you belong to the one that heaven follows. And you belong to the one who in his death and resurrection reclaimed the world for himself in an act of power and vengeance that none of us can ever comprehend. And he does those things because he looks at those who are far off and says, I want you back. Think about that Viktor Frankl illustration once again. What kind of hope do you have? None? Do you have a hope maybe something you don't really believe? Have you given your hope over to things that can be taken away? Or do you have a hope in something that's transcendent over all of your circumstances? I think what Jesus might want to say to you is if you want a hope that is regardless of your circumstances, or as I said last week, if you want a grace above your joys, and it will also be above your sorrows. If you want that kind of grace and that kind of hope, then stop putting your trust in yourself. And start putting your trust in the one that heaven follows, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came in flesh, died on a cross, raised in resurrection, ascended to be at the right hand of the Father, and says, if you have me, you're going to be okay. Because I am the resurrection and the life. And though you die, you do not die. So it's your new. What kind of hope do you have? Father, we pray that as we hear Paul's words, that we live by faith and not by sight. That we know of this deposit of a great hope that you have for us in the future. It's the defeat of death. It's the overcoming of rebellion. It's the making whole of that which is broken. It's heaven meeting earth. It's that we follow in the steps of Christ who resurrected from the grave. And so once again, we are built for all the things that are around us. We are built for standing between our toes, for the breeze hitting our face. And that we'll have this, but with the fullness of your dwelling. Imagine the sunsets, but infused with all of God's goodness. Imagine vehicles and architecture full of God's goodness. Imagine our relationships with each other with all of God's goodness. This is the hope that we long for. A hope that we know secretly in our minds, that we constantly want to desire. That you will make new, and the quality of what you will provide matches the quality of your goodness. And so we thank you. We love you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Yeah, you guys can stand. We're going to worship.
The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with Now at His feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. And your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to Him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Oh, King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The tomb where soldiers washed in grave was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.